tonight, we're really pleased to have Zelda Foxall back here with us again this evening. And Zelda has been doing in-character vignettes historically significant African-American women since 2008, when she co-founded the performing arts company, 'Cause It's Art, which existed from 2008 to 2014. Through Zelda, these women tell their own stories of overcoming the tremendous odds of poverty, racism, sexism, and ignorance to climb to the top of their respective fields. They boldly and bravely changed history.
Thank you so much. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. The name of that song is called Ella. And it was written by a woman named Bernice Johnson Reagan. She was an early member of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and she wrote that song 26 years after leaving SNCC, when she became a member of Sweet Honey in the Rocks. Yes. And I love that song because if you want to know anything about my approach to the civil rights movement, that song sums it up. My approach is teaching others to stand up and fight. My approach does not need for me to be in the limelight. My approach means that I am not afraid as a woman to be heard. I am interested in letting the young people lead the way, because the young people, they have the courage where we fail. That's my approach. And now, Enlighten, I'd like to share a little bit about my backstory to paint a picture about my approach to the civil rights movement. I worked for many, many political organizations in my day, including the three most prominent ones: the NAACP, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Now, let me tell you about my 50-year career in civil rights. I started out right after college. I had 10 years of political experience under my belt, and I had studied a range of social change ideas. So I knew a little bit about something. The NAACP hired me as a field organizer to go out and build memberships, recruit people. But it didn't take me long to realize I needed to be building more than memberships. I needed to be building relationships. People wanted to sit down with me and tell me what was going on. They would come to me and say, well, Ms. Baker, that's all well and good. The NAACP has a march here and there, and then nothing happens. We want to get into the fight. How do we empower ourselves to fight for ourselves? We're hungry for change. We want to see a difference. Strong people don't need strong leaders, and we're willing to fight. Well, I took that information back to headquarters, but unfortunately, they didn't see the value in grassroots leadership. They didn't see the value in people fighting for themselves. They were a top-down leadership organization. I didn't let that stop me. No. I went behind their backs and I worked with those people. I empowered them. I told them what they needed to do, because in the end, in order to have power, you needed to be able to vote. And so I empowered them. And with that step, I had allies who remained with me my entire career. And I would go back to those allies year after year and get their support in our fight. Needless to say, I had a lot of conflict with the people in the NAACP, the leadership. So I didn't stay long. And I went on to join the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And let me tell you something about that. That organization was started by Dr. King right after the success of the bus boycott in Montgomery. 381 days. The reason why that boycott was successful: women power. There was the Women's Political Caucus. They had been involved in the segregation of the buses fight in Montgomery for years, at least 10 years, and they had pushed to try to get a boycott going. Nobody would listen to them. Finally, after getting the women to go and testify in the Supreme Court about the segregation on the buses, and they were all women who testified, we won that decision. And there was a change. And so when Dr. King made that organization, was forming it, he was looking for leaders. There was Rosa Parks. She was not a novice. Rosa Parks had been trained as a leader and an activist in the Highlander folk school in Tennessee. She was seasoned. She had strategies. She was knowledgeable. And there was Joanne Robinson, who was president. She was president of the Women's Political Caucus, who led the fight at the Supreme Court decision. But none of those women were considered for leadership roles in the SCLC. You see, it was an organization of ministers. I have nothing against ministers, but they do not know how to run a political organization. They run a church. Now, Dr. King and his advisors all knew my background, worked with NAACP. I had many successes under my belt. I know how to organize. I know how to strategize. I know how to empower people. So while the ministers and Dr. King looked for a co-leader for the new organization, they brought me on as a temporary hire. My title was organizer and strategizer, in name only. Because in working with the ministers, I was treated as a staffer. My leadership was not recognized nor affirmed. The ministers would refer to the women in the organization. I'm the only professional one, but they would refer to us as helpers, as clerical. And when they would relate to us on a day-to-day basis, it was more often than not, well, Sister Grace, you look really nice today. Or, well, Sister Jones, oh my, that was a wonderful, wonderful soup that you made and served to the congregation. You need to give that recipe to my wife. That was how we were related to. And let me tell you about dress. Look at me. I am no fashion plate. I dress plainly. I talk loud. And I have lots of opinions. And I'm not afraid to voice my opinion, even if they are in disagreement with some of the iron. Needless to say, that did not buy me a lot of friends in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. No. There was constant conflict, constant disagreement. But you know, the toughest, hardest thing of all for me was to listen to the ministers who went out in the public and talked about racial equality, while at the same time holding the women back. So late in 1959, I decided my time had come to leave. But before I could leave, there was something interesting happening. Something very exciting happening in the civil rights movement, which at that point had been the NAACP filing suits in court or marches. Not a lot of excitement. But then 4 college students in February 1960 went into Woolworth's department store, went up to the lunch counter, took a seat. Now, it wasn't about being able to be served hamburgers at the lunch counter. It wasn't about that. But the students were impatient and they wanted to get the movement going. They wanted to have direct action. And the lunch sit-ins were a symbol of the fact that we needed to take apart the system of segregation. And they wanted direct action. And when they did that, college students all over the South picked up the lantern. And they did the same. Oh, that was excitement. Didn't you know that the folks at the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, got their attention? Didn't you know that the people at the NAACP got their attention? These students were empowered and they were making a change. Everybody wanted to talk to those students. So I spoke with Dr. King. I was still at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He gave me permission to bring those students in to Shaw University at a conference. Get those young minds together They can strategize and talk and learn from each other. So I brought them there. We had 126 people attend. Let me give you a list of who was there. At that first meeting, which later became SNCC at the end of that conference, though some of the young people in attendance, John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis in later years, Marion Barry, who was the mayor of DC in the 90s, Julian Bond, Southern Poverty Organization, Eleanor Holmes Norton, Stokely Carmichael, who was one of the founders of the Black Power movement, Diane Nash. Diane Nash was a young college student who had one of the most successful freedom ride campaigns in all of the freedom rides that they had. This woman was phenomenal. She's still alive today as an advocate for the homeless. These were some of the young people that attended that conference, that were making a difference, that were doing direct action. Now, I must tell you, all of the state organizations, the NAACP, the SCLC, everybody wanted those young people. They wanted that energy. They wanted to put their arms around them, gather them up, make them a blank slate, start telling those young people what to do. But let me tell you, I did my research on those young people. Oh yes, they were young and inexperienced, but they wouldn't be blank slates for anybody to tell them what to do. They had their own ideas. They had their own ways of looking at things, of doing things, their own ambitions. So we brought them there. I facilitated. That means I listened. I didn't talk. I didn't advise. I listened. All the things that they wanted to do, that they wanted to achieve, to move forward. And after that, I began to share with them my experiences. And I said, I believe in grassroots leadership, not top down, but empowering young people, empowering women, empowering people who have limited education, as well as people who have degrees. We need everybody at the table. Everybody brings something to the table. And I believe in working in different generations, old people, young people. We all have something to bring to the table. After that weekend, it was an Easter weekend that we met. Those young people decided they wanted me to become their mentor. That was such an honor for me. And together we went forward with voter registration, freedom rides, freedom summer. But let me tell you, the most engaging project that I worked with those young people was Freedom Summer and the formation of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. That party was formed because blacks in Mississippi were locked out of the process. They had registered to vote, but they couldn't do much. They were being locked out of precincts. They were being given the wrong address to precinct meetings. Or if they let them in, they wouldn't let them talk. For 90 years, the state of Mississippi had sent all-white delegations to the Democratic National Convention. Well, things are going to be different. 1964 in Atlantic City, New Jersey, because the Mississippi Freedom Party had been organized, and we were going to challenge the all-white party that had the delegation that had always been sent. We had a goal. Our goal in this Mississippi Democratic Freedom Party, our goal wasn't to win anything. Our goal in forming this party was to push the Democratic Party to take a firm stance against racist all-white primaries. Our goal was to defend the right of Black citizens to vote. Our goal was to showcase the leadership and the agency of poor Black Southerners. That was our goal. As the director of the Washington chapter of the Mississippi Freedom Party, I pulled all the strings so that this new party with 64 Blacks, 4 whites. We would have had more, but people's lives were in danger and they were afraid. We were lucky to have those 4 because you were taking your life into your hands. We were 68 strong. And I pulled the strings so that we could testify in front of the Credentials Committee as to why we should be the party from Mississippi to be recognized rather than the all-white. We followed the democratic rules. We were an interracial party. We followed democratic process. They allowed 5 of us to testify. 1 who testified, the young widow of Michael Schwarber, one of the 3 young civil rights workers who had been murdered in June. And they had just found their bodies when we were on our way to Atlantic City. She testified. And another was Fannie Lou Hamer. She spoke for so many who had tried to vote, but had been fired, evicted, threatened, shot at, all because she wanted to vote. You recall she made that speech. Is this America? Is this the home, the land of the free, the home of the free? When we finished our testimony, we waited. And yet, mind you, as the director of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, I lobbied leaders of various civil rights organizations. I asked for their support. They assured me they would be behind us. Well, when the decision came, you know what it was. It was a compromise. The Democrats, could not stomach unseating all-white delegation and seating an interracial one on national TV. Johnson was so afraid that this would cause him to lose the gold one. the Democratic leadership too afraid to take that chance. So what they offered was to seat the entire white delegation and to offer two at-large seats to the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. People were outraged. They were disillusioned. They had put their trust in democracy. And it didn't happen. But let me say this. There were a lot of people that day who were disillusioned, who were turned off. But those who weren't, they learned some valuable lessons. One lesson, people will make promises to you, but when it gets too hot in the kitchen, they can't take the heat. They won't back you. And politics involves tough, soul-crushing compromises. But most importantly, these people learned, these domestics, these sharecroppers, these farmers, these janitors, these beauticians, they never dreamed that one day they would be on the national stage. Politics, where they would tell their story, where they would talk about their hopes and their dreams, to have their voices heard. But there they were. It had been a struggle. It didn't turn out the way they had hoped. No, it didn't. But here we were. And that meant we can resolve to fight harder, because change could come. And because those people did not give up, we see today some of those same people who started out in 1960. In today's world, they are members of Congress. They are leaders of civil rights organizations. We wish them and we honor them. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton and Congressman John Lewis. So as I close, I just want to say, oppressed people, whatever the level of their education, they have the ability to understand and to interpret the world around them. They have the ability to see the world for what it is, and they can move to transform it. So we who believe in freedom, we cannot rest until it comes. Thank you, Enlightened.
If there's questions from the audience, Priya will come over with the microphone. There's also one right now from the other audience, and it's the people in 1960 who went to the counters in Memphis. They were nonviolent. And so I thought I had it wrong, because they were. Did Martin Luther King train them? Or was there a bigger movement of nonviolence? Because
a lot of them have paid attention to Dr. King, because he was very influential. And so a lot of them were influenced by, in the early, things changed later. But yes, once, when SNCC was forming, they were for direct, non-violent action. Yes, absolutely.
Are there any questions in the audience?
You could speak up too. Repeating that.
I was just wondering if you got to meet her.
No, no. Ella Baker was born in 1903 and she died in 1986. And let me tell you, an interesting thing about how I heard about her. It was some of my friends in results. There was a conference in Seattle, I went at the Unitarian Church in the U District. And I think Karen, Leader Scott, and a few others went there, and I went along. And there was a young woman who was a minister there at the church. And she got up and she was giving a few remarks, and she mentioned a song called Alice. And then she mentioned Ella Baker, and I'm like, who's that? I've never heard of her. I don't know who she is. And so, and she spoke so strongly, so passionately about her. I went home and I looked her up. And that's all I never heard of her. There's so many people. Howard Zinn, I urge you to go on the web. She is just phenomenal. And for me, I believe in empowering people. I come from a family who dealt with things like this, and we were empowered. We were trained, and we had skin in the game, and that's how you're going to make a change. And so that's how I heard Ella Baker.
Did you say Howard Zinn did know her? Or
Yes.
Yeah.
Howard, oh my God, Howard Zinn and Ella Baker. Yes, yes, he loved. Yeah, it's a phenomenal relationship. And if you go on the YouTube, you'll see. Oh yeah, the Howard Zinn is quite something in his own right.
We know him mostly from the history of the United States, I think.
Yes.
And he probably didn't mention her in that one because the part that was more modern was very small, because he was doing it.
Yeah, well, they were thick as thieves there. Yeah. One of the things I loved about Ella, it's interesting that there were so many things I could talk about, but she mentioned that even though she wasn't well known among the masses of people, yes, who did know her? The FBI. They knew her quite well. And she said that when she was able to get a spot. And she said it was so funny because of they were reading, she's reading to the final, they were making notes about, why is she doing what she's doing? They couldn't figure her out because she's with the NAACP or SCLC, and then she's with all of these other humanitarian groups with the Puerto Rico, and she's everywhere. She has communist friends and another communist friends, and they were like, well, what is she doing? And nobody knows about her, nobody's listening to her. It's retarded, it's messy, They just could not see why anybody was doing what she's doing without making any money or getting any recognition. They just didn't. But she just thought that way. A little bit.
Did you said that she was with a group with Stokely Carmichael. Do you know what her relationship with Stokely Carmichael is?
Yes. She is one of the things she loved about young people. They weren't as chauvinistic as the older generation. But every he had to, slap Stokely and say, "Now, Stokely, that's a little sexist." And he revered her, and he learned from her. Those young people, there was James Foreman, who spoke lovingly and just felt that she was so inspirational. You can hear when all of the young Julian Bond, and he was like, "Oh my gosh,
You better not say the calling her Ella. Oh, no, it's Miss Ella. But yes, they were, it's just amazing that you never heard about it. But she did not seek the spotlight. That was not wrong, and she was doing what she did. Never. And it really frustrated her that some people got so enamored with some of the bigger leaders that they would put themselves enough into the game. I think she thought with those that were around them. But strong people. Strong people. Very good.
You mentioned also that they were so disappointed when the Mississippi Freedom Party did not get seated, and that Johnson did not do that, really support it. But then I'm thinking maybe, you know, you lose a battle and you win a war, because the next year you could say, what did she think?
They passed the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was phenomenal. Yeah, so that's what I meant by politics can be so crushing, but at the same time, sometimes you just gotta hold your nose. And let me tell you, that convention, Johnson was pulling the family had left. He was so, Johnson was so afraid. He knew all about it. What a strong he was. She was the last one on top. And what she found in the book that I was reading about, Johnson was so that he decided when he heard the family was live, then he decided, oh, that's right in the middle. They took him. And he came home, and the person was like, okay, so what? And he said, well, I told this because this is the 9th-month anniversary of God's so they did full press one night over. So they they played bang but that gives you Jonathan. He didn't want to fight for the school. He wanted everything to be beautiful and smooth. He didn't want to fight with John Connor, who was threatening to leave and take his folk with him. And in fact, they see the Mississippi delegation in our education. But guess what? They told, well, no, you're not going to go with that. You have to sign a warning. And you're going to they didn't say. So as the Johnson, yeah, and a lot of civil rights leaders who had promised that they were not. They have they talk about hungry. They said hungry, and they described as hungry came with these big eyes, tears welling, talking about, you know, he wants to get his new job as vice president, and he needs our help and does not, you know, make a fuss. And she goes, oh, Mr. Humphrey, you will listen. You will be help you say, oh God. So that's what you do. Oh, it's really exciting. The Democrats were in top position, and you know, they go on college, ask one. And none of the things that happened, or the fact that then later that year, they never again will have an all white, all male delegation, never again. That came out of the 1964 Democratic Convention. So yeah, compromise is tough. It's hard, but you gotta look to the future. You gotta have your eye on the prize.
You mentioned so many things. Now, most people will like to read a little bit more about her. I looked at the books, and I'm going to ask our library people too, but I didn't see anything with the name of Ella on it. And so maybe you could even, you've given some suggestions. maybe it would be like magazine articles, things like that. Or is there anything else you could suggest for us to fill in this blank?
Go to the web, look up Ella. There are so many videos. Hear her voice, her power. Hear these young women talk about how she made them feel, how she empowered them. It's beautiful. She just comes alive. She came alive for me. And she gives me hope. Look at how things are. We're fighting today, but there's hope. Those women, Ella, they can mentor us and help us move forward and keep us feeling hopeful and strong. We need that.
Zelda, would you someday bring a Fannie Lou Gamer here? Yeah.
I'd love to. I would love to bring them. And Fanny plays a huge role in the Ella story. This is Ella's story, so I had to fight to stay back, but I must say that 3 weeks before the 1964 convention, you had Ella Baker, college graduate, very articulate, and you had Fannie Lou Hamer, courageous, 6th grade education, sharecropper, going around, making the rounds in Congress and all of the different state delegations, you know, telling their story and asking for them to back them. The two of them were strong. And Fannie Lou Hamer said of Ella Baker that she said she was my mom. And she respected me and didn't treat me like I didn't know anything. She treated me as an equal and we worked so well together. That's empowerment. The one thing about some of the civil rights organizations, they tended to recruit from the middle class, the educated. Ella went to the domestics. Ella went to the beauty shops, the barber shops. She recruited where the people were. You don't need an education. You just need the will to go out and work. All comes from. And that was just beautiful.
This has been really, really wonderful. I want you to remember two things, that on our website, there's more resources that are posted and that Zelda suggested. And then also we have them in the little room next door. We have not only treats, but we will have a chance to talk with one another after this, a little bit of conversation. And you'll have a chance to look at the books that are up there on the board. So there's really interesting stuff in that little room too. Is there anything else that you could add to it? I think you could talk for a long time, and anything else, anybody else want to learn? I think then you go ahead
I
first.
just encourage you, and if you have a chance to go on the web and just see her for yourself.
Yes.
It's just amazing.
Thank you.